Good morning. It is Tuesday, January the 29th, and this is The Drill. And thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America today, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo. Speaking to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. You and I have been brainwashed. Brainwashed into believing we are conservative, when in reality we are reactionary. Decades ago, the Democrats, with the acquiescence of the Republicans, set the table, politically speaking, by deliberately redefining political identity. The Democrats decided that one's position on the issues are what define the political parties. Naturally, the Democrats decided what the issues should be. The news departments reinforced this decision, and the Republicans paid the price. Democrats created an action-reaction political dynamic with Republicans playing the role of reactionary. In reality, voters are either left or right as a matter of fact, not a matter of opinion. The most essential political fact of reality is change. You and I are defined by our attitudes about change. Change is indicated when there's an improvement to the status quo. Unless there's something obviously better than what we have now, we stay the course. That's realistic, i.e., conservative. Constant change in the blind search for perfection is idealistic, i.e., liberal or socialist. Defining voters by the issues turns everything on its head. Progress and moving forward take precedence over common sense. Change, not because it's better, but for the sake of change. Act first, think later. Trial and error. As a result of issues-based politics, Republicans become reflexively rigid and resist change for the sake of resisting change. We become caught in a trap of constantly reacting to liberals and socialists and unable to promote values. Talk show hosts have fallen into the reactionary trap of promoting opinion instead of values. The right talks and thinks only about political tactics and techniques, while American culture is ignored. This gets things backwards. If we concentrate on shaping our culture, the politics will follow. The political landscape today is the result of years and even decades of cultural influence, mainly by the left. Being conservative starts by asking questions, challenging the left's assumptions, and saying no. What's wrong with the way things are? Why question everything? Who says to question authority? What's wrong with being patriotic? What's wrong with being Christian? No, I'm not going to be promiscuous. No, I'm not going to give up my privacy. No, I'm not going to give up my property. No, I'm not going to deny reality, certainty, morality, and beauty. Being conservative isn't about standing athwart history and yelling stop. It's about standing athwart history and yelling prove it. Not fearing change, but not worshiping it either. Respecting the status quo. Thinking first rather than acting first. Subordinating might to right. And that, in essence, is what this show, this podcast, is all about. And when I come back, I'm going to be reading from Ayn Rand's Lexicon. And thank you very much. Welcome back. And we're going to the Ayn Rand Lexicon, and the concept of the day is aesthetic abstractions. There are many special or cross-file chains of abstractions, of interconnected concepts, in man's mind. Cognitive abstractions are the fundamental chain on which all others depend. Such chains are mental integrations, serving a special purpose and formed accordingly by a special criterion. Cognitive abstractions are formed by the criterion of what is essential, epistemologically essential to distinguish one class of existence from all others. Normative abstractions are formed by the criterion of what is good. Aesthetic abstractions are informed by the criterion of what is important. An artist does not fake reality, he stylizes it. He selects those aspects of existence which he regards as metaphysically significant, and by isolating and stressing them, by omitting the insignificant and accidental, he presents his view of existence. His concepts are not divorced from the facts of reality. They are concepts which integrate the facts and his metaphysical evaluation of the facts. His selection constitutes his evaluation. Everything included in a work of art, from theme to subject to brushstroke or adjective, requires metaphysical significance by the mere fact of being included, of being important enough to include. An artist, as for instance the sculptors of ancient Greece, who presents man as a godlike figure, is aware of the fact that men may be crippled or diseased or helpless, but he regards these conditions as accidental, as irrelevant to the essential nature of man, and he presents a figure embodying strength, beauty, intelligence, self-confidence as man's proper, natural state. An artist, as for instance the sculptors of the Middle Ages, who present man as a deformed monstrosity, is aware of the fact that there are men who are healthy, happy, or confident, but he regards these conditions as accidental or illusory, as irrelevant to man's essential nature, and he presents a tortured figure embodying pain, ugliness, terror, as man's proper, natural state. And that was Aesthetic Abstractions, the concept of the day from the Ayn Rand lexicon. And when I come back, I'm going to be reading from Out of the Ashes, Reclaiming American Culture. Thank you very much. And last time that I was reading from this book about rebuilding American culture, we were talking about, he said the first step basically in rebuilding American culture is acknowledging the truth and becoming truth tellers. We must become tellers of truth again, and people who are willing to hear truths too, especially when it hurts to hear them. Here's a first step. One of the most powerful influences upon my thought when I was young was Joseph Boswell's Life of Johnson. If Samuel Johnson had been born in our time, he would have had the genius drugged out of him by the various pharmaceutical enemies of boyhood. He might be finger painting with Einstein and Mozart in a group home or reformatory. But in the 18th century, his peculiar sensitivity and his many obsessions made him more human, not less, more apt to perceive the motives and the feelings of others, because he had been so accustomed to confronting the darkest and worst of his own self. Johnson was like a lone gladiator in the arena, said Boswell, standing up against the beasts when they came lunging from their cages. One day Boswell expressed a wish to be in Parliament, but noted, quote, "Perhaps, sir, I should be the less happy for being in Parliament. I would never sell my vote, and I should be vexed if things went wrong," unquote. Quote, "That's cant, sir," replied Johnson. Quote, "It would not vex you more in the House than in the gallery. Public affairs vex no man," unquote, he explained. Quote, "I have never slept an hour less nor ate an ounce less meat," unquote, because of a vote in Parliament. And he urged his friend, quote, "Clear your mind of cant," unquote. There's a form of cant that we call small talk. Useful and polite conversation. You may talk as other people do, Johnson told Boswell. Quote, "You may say to a man, 'Sir, I am your most humble servant.' You are not his most humble servant. You may talk in this matter. It is a mode of talking in society, but don't think foolishly," unquote. I believe now that the higher cant is too dangerous even for small talk, because we will inevitably end up thinking in its terms. Words like democracy, diversity, equality, inclusivity, marginalization, misogyny, racism, sexism, homophobia, imperialism, colonialism, progressivism, autonomy, and many others my readers might name are simply terms of political force and have no real meaning anymore. Some of them never had any meaning to begin with. Do not wash your food in chlorine. Do not sprinkle your thoughts with poison. The cant is everywhere, on television, on the radio, in newspapers and magazines, on billboards, in advertisements of all kinds, in the doctor's office, in your school. Very little else is in your school. In many a pulpit, alas, and on the lips of almost everybody you will meet. This is not the common talk of ordinary people in ordinary times. When the fishermen on an old schooner set down for the night, they did not talk about democracy, diversity, equality, inclusivity, and the rest of the nonsense. They talked about their work, the sea, good spots for cod or halibut, the ropes, the bad food, sails that needed repair, what ports they had visited, and what they saw and did there. They talked about home, their children, the woman waiting for one of them in St. John's, various misadventures with the police. They talked about human things. They might sing songs or play cards or chess or checkers or whittle scrimshaw. If one of them did launch into a political cant, he'd be roared down by the others or have a shot of whiskey splashed in his face. You have to be educated into cant. It is a kind of stupidity that surpasses the capacity of unaided nature to confer. Mass phenomena do the job, so that when you see someone whose brains have been addled by cant for a long time, say a politician, it is as if you were watching a puppet flapping its mouth while a ventriloquist made it say democracy, diversity, equality, inclusivity. You might provide the words yourself if you were in a mischievous mood. Try it someday. When you find a canting politician or journalist or commentator on television, turn off the sound and supply the words. There's no mind there, only a predictable drone of empty words where a mind used to be. Here's a quick and generally reliable rule to follow. If people have always said it, it is probably true. It is the distilled wisdom of the ages. If people have not always said it, but everybody is saying it now, it is probably a lie. It is the concentrated mindlessness of the moment. People are especially prone to cant when they describe their feelings in public. When someone says, quote, I am offended by that remark, unquote, the first thing you must think in our time is that the remark has broken upon the person's day like the bright sun through a week of rain and gloom. An owl is not offended by the little field mouse. It is just what the owl is on the lookout for. If the offended person loses any sleep that night, it will not be for sorrow, but for delightful dreams of vengeance and public displays of virtue. The cannibal rolls up his sleeves and whets the knife. For truly tolerant people are hard to offend. They do not seek occasion to bring others into ill repute. They do not put the worst construction on someone else's words or deeds. When someone says, I am truly saddened by the words of my political opponent, or philosophical opponent, or theological opponent, or whatever, it is almost always a lie. A chess player is not saddened when his opponent plunks his queen down in just the place for a deadly fork. He can hardly believe his eyes. So it was that Job, catching Abner with his guard down, took him aside for a nice chat, and that was the end of Abner. 2 Samuel chapter 3, verses 23 through 27. So, and again, I like it because this is emphasizing the importance of culture and how culture affects, because how we're influenced culturally is going to affect the way we communicate with one another, how we think, and how we think is going to eventually affect how we vote, what we vote for or against, and who we vote for or against. That's what I mean when I'm saying that the last election, for instance, this just back in this last November, was the result again of years of influence. What you're seeing politically in this country is not something that's happened overnight. A lot of pundits want to look for immediate causes. They want to look for, well, what happened yesterday that caused the behavior that we're seeing today? It wasn't. There's nothing that happened yesterday. That's why a lot of this stuff seems to come out of nowhere. People think, why? The whole world seems to be going insane all of a sudden. But it's not all of a sudden. It is something that's been brewing, again, 4 years, 4 decades. It brews in movies. It brews in television shows. It brews in newspaper articles, magazine articles, books. So when you have, like I've gone on about Breaking Bad, for instance, Breaking Bad and Burn Notice, excellently made television shows. Absolutely outstanding. They were outstanding in terms of their acting, outstanding. Every bit of it, the writing, all of it's outstanding. The one problem with it is that it defies reality. The reality is that we have because we know by the evidence of our senses that We are in a benevolent universe. The success is to be expected. And because of that, we know that might does not make right, and the ends don't justify the means. We don't need to cheat. It's not necessary. That's why we frown on it. That's also, by the way, how you can tell when people on the left are lying. Those people that try to claim that they cheat because they're forced to, or that cheating is somehow admirable or an okay thing to do because it's a crappy world. It's a really crappy universe. So, you got to do what you got to do. It's dog eat dog out there. BS. How many of the people on the left celebrate Bernie Madoff? Zero. Not one person on the left patted him on the back and said, way to go, way to stick it to the man. Because he cheated, and he cheated a whole lot of people. And a lot of them, maybe most, maybe all of them, were rich. But the left still didn't pat him on the back because they don't believe what they're saying when they try to suggest that might makes right and the ends justify the means. And that's what you're seeing in Breaking Bad. That's what you're seeing in Burn Notice. That might makes right and the ends justify the means. And unless you're aware of this, it can have a really negative effect on you as an individual, as a citizen. You look at see what goes on this television show, and you start to think to yourself, hey, if he can get away with blowing things up whenever he wants to, maybe I can get away with cheating on my taxes or embezzling stuff from work, stealing from work in various ways, shapes, or forms. And that there is no wrong, there's just getting caught or getting away with it. No, not true. And then you wonder, years later, you wonder why you wake up every morning and you're depressed. Why it is you find less and less energy to go through each and every day. Well, that's why. Because you're living a lie. You're out trying to outmaneuver people every day, and you're not acting in a moral or ethical manner, in ways you should act. But that brings us to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And until next time, I thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.